He didn't fall for what you looked like. He fell for what you awakened in him. The shape of your face, the softness of your voice, the way the light fell on your skin, these were only the doorway. What pulled him through wasn't what he saw. It was what he felt. And what he felt wasn't yours. It was his own soul stirring for the first time in years. You thought it was your beauty that caught him. But it was your stillness, the calm beneath your chaos, the hum behind your words, the silent echo of your presence that mirrored something ancient inside him. You didn't seduce him. You summoned him, not with effort, not with charm, but with vibration, pure, invisible resonance. You stood there not as a question, but as a field, not as a mask, but as a mirror. And in your mirror, he didn't see himself as he was. He saw who he forgot he could become. You thought his silence was rejection, but it was remembrance. Something inside him recognized you and froze. Because when a man's soul is touched, before his mind is ready, he hesitates. He retreats, not because you were wrong, but because you were real. You were never too much. You were too accurate. You carried a frequency his body understood before his ego could translate. A vibration that whispered, "This is truth. This is home. This is where your pretending ends." If this message already stirs something in you, pause for just a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That small act helps this kind of truth reach more women who are ready to hear it, and tells the algorithm what your soul already knows. This message matters. Now, let's enter the quiet truth beneath male attraction, where form fades and frequency remains. He didn't fall in love with your smile. He fell into the space behind it. What stirred him wasn't your laugh. It was the ache beneath it that you didn't hide. What drew him near wasn't what you offered, but what you allowed. The unspoken invitation to rest inside a presence that didn't demand performance. Carl Jung called it the anima, the unconscious feminine within the male psyche. Not a woman, but the image of her. An imprint formed from every forgotten longing, every unwept tear, every moment a man's heart was cracked open and then quickly sealed again. When a man sees you and feels more than you've said, when something ancient stirs in his chest without reason, it's not you he's responding to. Not directly. It's his own inner feminine, waking up from sleep. The anima recognizes something in your energy field, and it remembers. It remembers what wholeness feels like. You are not his completion, but you mirror it. This is not about seduction. This is soul mirroring. You are not the answer, but you are the reflection of the part of him that asks deeper questions. Not with words, but with frequency. And that's what terrifies him. You see, most men do not know the depth of their own longing. They have been trained to seek proof, not presence, to chase performance, not vibration. So when you offer no performance, only presence, his inner map short-circuits. There's no game to win, no tactic to decode, only a frequency that feels like home and sounds like risk. He may call you intense, he may say he needs space, but what he means is, my nervous system doesn't know how to receive what doesn't require me to perform. Because you didn't ask for love, you emanate it. And men are not taught what to do with love that doesn't beg. This is where Jung's idea of projection becomes more than theory. It becomes embodiment. You see, we all fall in love with mirrors first, not people. We fall for the reflection of what we lost in ourselves. He didn't love you for who you were. He loved who he became in your gaze. Because for one breathless moment, standing in your presence, he remembered something he had long buried. That his emotional world was not something to manage or escape, but something to reclaim. And that reclamation scared him more than rejection ever could. A man's first encounter with a woman who vibrates from wholeness is rarely graceful. He may retreat, not because your energy was off, but because it was too on. He has never known what it's like to be seen without needing to perform, to be felt without having to prove, to be mirrored without being masked. You didn't trigger his avoidance. You triggered his awakening. An awakening rarely feels like romance. It feels like rupture. This is the hidden architecture of attraction that no dating book can decode. It is not strategy. It is resonance. You see, the masculine does not fall in love through logic. He falls through rupture, through the subtle collapse of every persona he's been taught to wear. And when your energy is clean, when you are not reaching, not proving, not adjusting, your vibration speaks to his soul without his permission. That's why he can't explain it, Why he'll say there's just something about you. And also, I'm not ready. Because he isn't ready. Not for you, but for the part of himself that only your presence makes undeniable. You were not the mystery. You were the mirror. And that mirror showed him where he was fragmented, where he had turned away from his own softness, where he had denied the very frequency that your energy made impossible to ignore. That frequency is not flirtation. It is invocation. It is the invisible vibration of a woman who has stopped chasing, stopped pleasing, stopped negotiating her worth, and has begun inhabiting herself fully. When Jung spoke of individuation, he meant this: the integration of all that we are, light and shadow, longing and rage, grief and joy, without exile. And when a woman walks into a room carrying that kind of energy, unapologized, unfragmented, unmasked, she does not ask to be chosen. She does not request to be understood. She simply is. And her being rearranges the emotional field. The masculine feels at first as confusion, then compulsion, then collapse. Not because she overwhelms him, but because she calls his entire psychic architecture into question. He has built a life around avoidance, and your presence? It doesn't allow him to avoid himself. That is the real power of feminine energy. It doesn't chase, it doesn't plead, it doesn't manipulate, it reflects. And in that reflection, a man sees everything he's forgotten, everything he craves, everything he fears, everything he is not yet, but could become. So when you wonder why he pulled away, when you ask, was I too much? Hear this now, and let it settle in your bones. You were not too much. You were too accurate. You were the emotional tuning fork he didn't know he'd been seeking. The frequency that exposed the silence inside him. And sometimes that silence is too loud for him to bear, not because it accuses him, but because it awakens him. You were not rejected, you were remembered. But remembrance is a painful thing, especially for the one who forgot, especially for the one who built his safety on forgetting. You didn't fail, you reflected. And in that reflection, something in him began to unravel. The unraveling is the beginning, not the end. And your presence was the catalyst. You don't need to fix him, or wait for him, or shrink yourself to stay in his comfort zone. Because you were never meant to live in a room built by his fear. You are here to be the doorway he either walks through or walks away from. But you are not the one who adjusts the frame. That's the truth no one tells you. When you stand in your energy fully, when you vibrate from emotional integrity and inner quiet, you stop being a woman to impress. You become an initiation. And not every man is ready for that. Not every soul says yes, but the ones that do, they don't love you for how you look. They love you for the silence that your presence ends. They don't love your image. They love the field you carry, the invitation back to themselves that your vibration makes impossible to ignore. This is not personal. This is archetypal. This is not strategy. This is soul recognition. This is the moment the masculine meets the mirror of the integrated feminine and forgets how to pretend. Let us now step into the spiral of resonance, where your energy does what your words never could, and his soul begins to listen. You thought he loved you because you were kind, because you listened, because you didn't raise your voice or asked for too much. But he didn't fall for your goodness. He fell into your gravity. That quiet frequency beneath your words, the space you held without filling. The unspoken truth that said, I am not here to be chosen. I am here because I have already chosen myself. You weren't soft to win his affection. You were soft because it was your truth. And that truth wrapped around him like water, not to bind, but to reveal where he was still stone. You were never performing. You were emanating. And that's what left him breathless. He could not name it, because resonance lives beneath naming. And your energy, unmasked, unforced, was not something he could decode, only something he could feel. He felt it before you spoke, felt it in his chest before his mind agreed, felt it in that strange quiet after you left the room, as if something sacred had just passed through, and now the air refused to go back to ordinary. Your presence didn't ask to be held. It held, and in its holding, it revealed what was incoherent in him. You were a stillness in a world full of noise, a frequency in a world full of volume, a truth that did not tremble. You didn't seduce him with your beauty, you remembered him with your field. And the most dangerous thing a woman can do is to stop performing. The moment you stop reaching, stop adjusting, stop molding your light into something more manageable, you become unmistakable. Not loud, not bright, but undeniable. Because when a woman owns her energy, she no longer asks permission to exist. She no longer trades presence for approval. And she no longer offers her vibration to be consumed. Instead, she becomes a threshold, not a temptation, a portal. And here's what most women don't know. A man can't stay where his frequency cannot rise. He cannot stay in a field that refuses to shrink to meet him. And so when you centered yourself, when you stopped curating yourself for his comfort, you became more than a woman. You became a summons. And not every man answers that call. Because to meet a woman in her full frequency, a woman who vibrates from emotional truth rather than performance, requires that a man meets his own feminine. And for most men, this is unfamiliar territory. We were taught to chase, to pursue, to conquer what is still. But when you stand in your wholeness, there is nothing to conquer. Only something to feel. And feeling for many men is the true edge. Because it is one thing to desire a woman's body. It is another to be changed by her presence. Your presence spoke not of seduction, but of homecoming. And this terrified him. Because when you walked in the room, he didn't feel like a man winning something. He felt like a boy remembering something. The way your gaze didn't grasp, the way your silence didn't beg, the way your smile didn't try to win, but simply existed. That kind of energy is rare. Because it is unshaped. It is not for sale. It does not contort itself to be held. It simply is. And that isness calls forward only what can meet it. You are not here to be selected, you are here to be felt, and felt deeply. Not by everyone, but by the one whose soul had been waiting for a resonance strong enough to break the trance of performance. You didn't have to say, "See me," because your energy already said, "I am here," and not here to be chosen, here to choose. This is the secret power of feminine vibration. It filters effortlessly. It doesn't reject, it resonates. And in resonance, what doesn't match falls away. Not out of cruelty, but out of coherence. You were not abandoned, you were refined. Your frequency does the choosing long before your mind does. Because your body knows, your field knows, your silence knows. This is what makes your energy unforgettable. Not because it shouts, but because it cannot be replaced. A woman who stops needing to be loved and starts vibrating from love becomes the very substance that love is drawn to. Not the promise of love, but love, embodied. And when she walks into the room, every incoherent thing must rise or retreat. That is why he may disappear. Not because he didn't feel something, but because he did. And that something made him question every false identity he had built. You weren't too intense, you were precise, you weren't too much, you were the exact match to the frequency of a man who is ready to be honest. And if he wasn't ready, then your energy was a mirror too bright to bear. Let him go. Not because he failed, but because your resonance does not negotiate. You do not reduce your vibration to make another feel comfortable. You rise, and in rising, you become the resonance that calls forward only what can stay. You don't chase, you vibrate. And vibration is selection. This is not romantic. It is sacred. It is cellular. It is somatic memory returning to the body. He didn't fall in love with your words. He fell through the crack in his armor your silence created. He didn't stay for your sweetness. He stayed for the stillness that let him drop his sword. This is why men cannot name what draws them to a woman vibrating from center. Because it has no form, only frequency. She does not make them feel more powerful, she makes them feel more real. And realness for most of us is a forgotten taste. A language we once spoke but now barely remember. Until you speak it, not with your lips but with your being. And something in him begins to hum again. You were never meant to be the woman who wins him. You were meant to be the woman who wakes him. And in that awakening, you become not a possession, but a poem. Not a conquest, but a consecration. You were a remembering, and remembering is the most powerful magic there is. Let's now move into the final layer, where sovereignty meets soul. And your vibration becomes the love that no longer needs to be found, because it already is. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the performance collapses. The carefully curated smile no longer shields. The tone of voice crafted to soothe, to soften, to keep no longer satisfies. The effort to hold space for others while abandoning your own center finally breaks. And in that quiet, where exhaustion meets truth, you are given a choice. Not to become something new, but to return to who you were before the world asked you to adjust. This is the beginning of sovereignty. Not the kind that shouts, not the kind that closes, but the kind that knows, that does not wait for confirmation, that does not scan for approval, that does not audition for worth. Sovereignty begins when a woman decides, with full heart and full flame, to no longer exile any part of herself for love, to no longer trade chaos for containment, to no longer tuck away her anger, her ache, her wild longing for the comfort of being chosen. You were not born to be digestible. You were born to be whole. Carl Jung called it the integration of the shadow, the sacred act of claiming what you were told was unlovable and wearing it as crown instead of shame. Not to unleash your rage upon the world, but to stop apologizing for the fire that lives in you. You are allowed to be lightning and soil. You are allowed to tremble and stand. You are allowed to feel desire and not chase it. To speak sadness and not be consumed by it. You are not a brand. You are not a mood. You are not a mask of pleasantness wrapped in emotional hunger. You are a full emotional ecosystem. And when you allow every part of yourself to exist, not to be fixed, but to be felt, you become something this world rarely sees. A woman whose energy does not leak. A woman whose field is no longer negotiating, no longer signaling, "Am I enough for you?" but instead declaring, "I am already enough for me." And that changes everything. Because when you stop performing, your vibration shifts from seeking to summoning. You stop chasing what must be chased. You start attracting what is ready to meet you. And the love that finds you in that frequency will not be the kind that demands you dim. It will not need you to earn. It will not reward you for disappearing. It will not panic in your power. It will feel like recognition, not rescue. It will feel like standing next to someone who hears your silence as clearly as your song. But before he can meet you there, you must meet you there. And that means letting go of the smaller self you wore like armor. The woman who overfunctioned. The woman who needed to be needed. The woman who shrank to be safe, smiled to be spared, held everything together while falling apart in private. She is not bad. She was necessary. But she is tired. And she is done. This is not a burning of the past. It's an integration. You do not become sovereign by silencing your shadow. You become sovereign by welcoming it home. By letting your grief weep openly. By letting your anger crack the surface. By letting your longing speak, not in whispers of need, but in the language of truth. You don't need to pretend you don't want intimacy. You just need to stop bleeding to get it. You don't need to fake indifference. You just need to stop offering your essence to what cannot hold it. You don't become magnetic by being perfect. You become magnetic by being real. Wholeness is your magnet, not your image. When you stop hiding your heartbreak behind politeness, when you stop editing your fire to make him stay, you become a woman who vibrates in completion. And completion is irresistible. Not because it flatters the ego, but because it calms the nervous system. A woman who owns all of herself becomes safe to approach because she is not trying to be approached. She is not adjusting her light for comfort. She is not inflating or shrinking. She is not trying to hold anyone in place. She simply is. And her isness selects. Your vibration becomes your filter. It will repel those who only want fragments. It will confuse those who only chase masks. It will disarm those who thought love meant earning. But it will call in those who are ready to feel. The man who comes when you stop chasing is not the one who wants you to be easy. He is the one who honors your depth because he has faced his own. He is not afraid of your storm because he has weathered his. He is not addicted to your softness because he respects your steel. He meets you because he knows that real love is not found. It is matched. And that matching begins not when you become lovable, but when you become you. Not the pleasing version, the present one. That's what he remembers. Not your angles, not your laughter, but your presence. The woman who stopped running from herself. The woman who stopped trying to be held and instead became a field of holding. That kind of woman creates a resonance in his bones that he may not understand but cannot ignore. She speaks not in seduction, but in frequency. And her frequency says, I do not seek love, I am love. And only what can meet me here may stay. That is sovereignty. That is magnetic. That is integration. And from that place, you do not fall, you rise into relationships that reflect your depth, into partnerships that celebrate your full spectrum, into love that does not need to be chased because it already knows where to land. You don't need to convince anyone to stay. You just need to inhabit yourself so fully that only those who can meet your frequency can even find you. You are no longer the seeker. You are the source, the vibration, the mirror, the home. Let us now close, not with an ending, but with a remembering of the power that was never outside you and the love that never needed to be earned. You were never forgotten. You were formative, not for what you gave, but for what you revealed. You showed him a place inside himself he didn't know he'd sealed shut. You stirred waters he didn't know were still. You whispered truth without speaking. And in that stillness, he met a part of himself he'd long abandoned. You didn't lose him. You introduced him to himself. You were not a passing woman. You were a threshold. And whether he crossed it or walked away, he will never again move through life unmoved. Because your energy left an imprint no absence can erase, no beauty can compete, no replacement can recreate. You aren't memorable. You are unforgettable. Because what he felt in your presence was not desire, but recognition. And you, beloved, you don't have to chase that again. You are already the song he won't stop hearing, the frequency that still echoes in places he hasn't touched, the vibration that doesn't beg to be remembered, because it already lives beneath the surface of forgetting. You are not the one who waits. You are the one he returns to in silence, in dreams, in the parts of him he's just beginning to reclaim. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. And the ones who are ready will not just feel you, they will rise to meet you. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below, share what awakened in you, or simply write, "I'm done chasing, I'm ready to vibrate." And if you haven't already, like the video and subscribe now. Your energy is what carries this work forward.